Hello, here we are, number 7 out of 7 in the Emotional Leadership series. Thank you all for sticking with it. You guys have got some persistence. Appreciate your support, and I hope that you've been garnering a lot of self-learning and it's been interesting for you. Just so you know, it's daytime, so I'm filming in natural light and studio light, so if you see a bit of light change, that's what's going on. Alright, if you have not seen, especially video number 1 in this series, I encourage you now to go back, watch that video and get a relationship with what is the purpose of our major negative emotions. You've already, if you've watched the series, you've already been through that, and you've been through the 6 major negative emotional states, how they affect us, how they impact our leadership, how they limit our effectiveness, and then what to do about them. So the question is, what are we talking about today? We've already done those 6 major limiting emotions. What else could there be to talk about? Well, let me tell you, there is a heap to talk about. And if you're in a coaching relationship already, you will know this. You will know that the job of the coach is to identify where you're being limited by your thinking, your strategy, your processes, and to pull you up on that and to give you the opportunity to make whatever changes you need to make. And I wanted to invite you into that world. If you've never been coached around your leadership psychology and your emotional state, I wanted to use today as a bit of an introduction for you so that you can see what it's like. And then if you know that that's something that you've got to work on, you know that your leadership psychology is not a match for the level of results you want to build commercially, then you've definitely got to have a taste of this and then back that up by getting on a call with me so we can talk about it. So let's talk about this next layer, this deep dive down into what is emotional leadership. Emotional leadership is knowing what state you are in, knowing what state mentally, emotionally, and physically, and then having the strategies to navigate through those states to get yourself to productive leadership states. We talk a lot in coaching about flow state, which is a psychological state that people experience as being in the zone or on fire. And it's where you're so intensely focused on what's going on and the magic it is to producing results. And the world just disappears, time disappears, other influences disappear, the world gets very quiet, and we just are able to go into this positive feedback loop of producing results. Now, people think of flow state as something that just happens to them. You know, it's just a bonus when it happens and it's amazing and just soak it up and enjoy it. Well, I'm here to tell you, and any coach worth their salt will tell you that flow state can be engineered. And with teaching you all of these insights about limiting emotional states, about correcting perception around limiting emotional states, all of that is pushing us towards this place of, we talked about reacting versus repressing versus responding, so we're moving toward that place all the time. And the reason we want to move to this place of responding is that responding is part of the flow state formula. Ta-da! So we want to be engineering flow wherever we can. Flow is where we have optimal creativity, ability to solve problems. It's pleasurable. It's great for your nervous system because it feels so good. And it's when your genius shines. It's when the magic inside you comes out in paper or on process or when you're leading people. So we want to be moving towards responding instead of reacting and repressing, because responding is part of the formula of flow state. I'm not going to say anything more about flow state for now, except that that's the job of your coach, is to be engineering you, your environment, your perceptions to generate as much flow time as possible. So let's talk about the things that also impact flow. So we talked about the 6 major negative emotions as influences and limiters into flow. When we're reacting or repressing those limiting emotions and we're not responding, we're not processing them, it limits our leadership on ourselves and it limits our ability to influence and engage others, which straight up, you want to produce big results, it ain't happening on your own. It's your ability to effectively engage people, whether that be through the engagement of your marketplace, through the engagement of your leadership team, through the engagement of your supplier. And if you're a leader at home, I know this is going over into the personal context, but don't you want to be a more impactful, influential leader over your child compared to the friends encouraging them to maybe do risk-taking behaviours. This is leadership everywhere in our life really mattering. So we want to look at where we also, this deep dive is looking at where our perception of our emotional states is also limiting us, okay? There's three main ways that I see or people perceive as negative emotional states impacting their leadership aside from the emotions, and it's to do with their perception. So for those of you who are really switched on and have followed this series closely, you'll have recognised patterns in dealing with the major negative emotions, with the anger, the sadness, the fear, hurt, guilt and shame. Each emotion had a message, and then it had a series of steps that you could take to effectively process and respond to that emotion. And like I said, for those of you who are switched on, were really paying attention, you would have seen that there was a huge theme of perception in those feedback strategies. Perception of the environment, perception of self, perception of boundaries, perception of rules, perception of levels expected from other people, perception of loss. And in almost each emotion, we talked about how there's the world of real loss or real anger, and then there's imagine. So it's us forecasting out into the future and fantasizing about the future, imagining scenarios, and then having the emotional reaction to that. So we talked a lot about perception, if you read deeper into it. And that's the real conclusion point to this whole series, is to now go into really what you should be, what I invite you to work on yourself around, and what I invite you to delve deep into is your perception of these three persistent emotional experiences that I deal with my leaders in business. Let's do this. The first one is overwhelm. So instead of the feedback message of overwhelm, which is you've lost control, this illusion of control, instead a really easy place people go, and a really practiced and conditioned place people go with overwhelm, is they go to interpreting it as, instead of, oh, I need to redevelop my sense of control through taking small action and prioritizing, they instead interpret overwhelm as, oh, this is the world telling me that's the limit of my effectiveness, so that's as far as I go. So basically they interpret it as, this is me hitting up against my boundary conditions, and that somehow those boundary conditions are real. So as a coach, that concerns me, because if those boundary conditions limit their behavior, limit their choices, limit their resourcefulness, then I can't increase the probability of that person producing the result that sits outside those boundaries. So straight up, we have to challenge that perception, okay? If you're coming up against overwhelm, powerlessness, lack of control, instead of interpreting it the way we talked about in the sadness video, if you're interpreting it as, oh, this is just it, I've just hit my level, this is as far as I go right now, I'll wait for something or someone to change for me to go beyond that, then that's a big warning sign to you. That means that you have got a really negative perception and interpretation of what overwhelm means, okay? So I invite you to shift your perception from, oh, this is my limit, to, oh, hang on, this is about priority, this is about perception of myself and perception of how capable I am, and to what level I can grow and expand myself. So that's the first one. The second one I deal with a lot is people dealing with their anger, frustration, irritation, annoyance, things not moving fast enough, people not getting it, stuff getting in their way. So of course, working with entrepreneurs, I deal with people who are really fast-paced, fast thinkers, kick-ass implementers, and often the environment, the people around us and the structures don't move at the same pace. So frustration, irritation, anger, and annoyance are really common, but they're all on the same spectrum. They're all in the anger spectrum. And we know from the anger video that the message of anger is that a rule or boundary is being crossed, and we need to pay attention to that. But a lot of people, instead of using that interpretation, their interpretation of anger is, oh, this is the limit of effectiveness of the people around me and the systems. And when they surrender and become resigned around, oh, I'm not getting a result here, I'm not producing an effect, this person isn't getting it, this isn't happening fast enough, people aren't smart enough. Instead of interpreting it as, oh, okay, great, it's time to reevaluate the rules and conditions and the boundaries that I've assigned, they interpret it as, it's time to give up. Give up on those people, give up on those attempts, people aren't smart enough, don't bother, give up, this is it. This is about as far as you're going to go. So again, exactly the same as the issue with overwhelm. I have a problem with that as a coach. If people are doing that interpretation, that perception, they are doing a disservice to themselves and the results they're out to produce. So the job is to shift the perception, recalibrate and go, right, so what it actually means, what we really want to take it as, it's a limit in your leadership. It's a breakdown in your effectiveness as a leader to engage, to get people to take aligned action, to express your vision and do the proper execution work that needs to be done. So anger, saying, well, just give up because people out there and the world out there and the government and business and the structures and the powers that be, all of that's ineffective. That is an ineffective and disempowered response to anger. So the third one is the one that's just everywhere and it's always dressed up in lots of fancy little outfits so people don't always identify it for what it is, but it's just straight up fear. So remember from the emotion videos, fear is saying be prepared. It's the Boy Scouts oath. Saying be prepared, something's going to happen. You can take preparatory steps to minimize the risk, minimize the danger of it. And we do spend a lot of time negatively fantasizing about what bad stuff is going to happen. And a lot of it is stuff that's out of our control, so we do spend quite a bit of time fantasizing about things that we can't ever do anything about, which is great for the old overwhelmed feelings, if you want to start stacking the negative emotions together. And it is a real issue of perception, all right? But not only do people experience fear and then go, oh, right, okay, I'm just going to repress it or have a reaction to it, instead of responding with the be prepared and taking the preparatory steps and reevaluating the probability of those negative consequences happening. Instead of interpreting it that way, people will interpret with their reaction. And their reaction is often, oh, I'm scared. That means it's time to just stop. That means it's just time to stop. This is a sign. This is a sign from the world, from people. Actually, maybe it's a sign from like deep inside me. Maybe it's my intuition. Maybe it's my instinct. And I'm a big believer in intuition and instinct. Okay, so don't turn me saying this into somehow dismissing that. But a lot of people get their fear, get their physiological feedback response of fear, and their interpretation straight up is, oh, this is my sign to stop. And again, as a coach, I have a big issue with that, because if you're out to produce a certain level of results, you hit up against your fear, that limitation in thinking, that limit in experience, it opens up an opportunity for preparation, for reassessment, for recalibration, for expanding your leadership capacity, for transferring skills and confidence from other areas so that you can adapt them, what we call modeling and strategy adaptation from other areas of your life where you're effective and feel confident. We have an opportunity to do all of that. But if you interpret fear as, oh, okay, that's it, this is it, I'm out of here, bye-bye, that's my limit, that's it, we know it reflects a deeper psychology of limited thinking. And we really need to dismantle that and bust through that if you want to go beyond the level of results you've had before. Now, in summary, you'll see there's a theme there, which is just this interpretation of, I get this emotional feedback and I interpret it as it's time to either stop, or I can't engage people, or this is a limit in me. And then I want you to think about, well, what's on the other side of that? Not just in the other side in terms of the practical steps for each emotion, but as a deeper core position that you take around your own leadership and being someone who's committed to expansion and expanding yourself to get expansive results. The underlying theme that I'm going to invite you to look at is reconditioning our interpretation of unpleasant and uncomfortable emotions. So after years of working on this for myself and with my clients, my relationship is now that these uncomfortable states are a signal that I'm growing. So just like when I'm working out and I'm working on a particular muscle, you know, that sensation of growing that muscle is not pleasant. I'm actually on a micro level, I'm breaking fibers to form new ones, to trigger growth, to trigger tissue generation. And it's exactly the same for us, which is there's going to have to be a little bit of discomfort to get all that yield, to get that growth, to get that return on our personal expansion. And we've spent most of our lives through strategies of relief like entertainment, drugs, food, social interactions, our sexuality, our media, or even as simple as stuff as our environment and how we use technology. All of those things we use to get relief from our negative emotional states. And I'm here to say it's time for an absolute revolution in that. It's a time for an absolute revolution in the way we interpret our negative emotional states and the way we interpret our stress, so that we can start to build some really healthy stress management strategies and start to build effective responses to all these feedback signals that we get, instead of labeling them as bad or insurmountable or true, real, affecting us so powerfully. I want us to start to move towards a world where we identify growth for the sensation that it is expansion instead of a sign to stop. I want us to move towards this world where we see that, okay, I have a baseline of dealing with my stress, because if I'm committed to big results, I'm going to go out there and put myself in situations where I get scared, where I get vulnerable, where I get overwhelmed, where I get frustrated. Those things are going to happen if I don't have a baseline of my personal stress. Sort of like being a big ocean liner in the middle of a wild storm. You know, that ocean liner is pretty solid and able to be untouched by that storm, but a little dinghy without a big base, it just gets thrown around. So we want this really fat, solid baseline of stress management strategies, of our own emotional intelligence. That's what I'm encouraging everybody to move towards. Now, if this speaks to you, if you can see for yourself, actually, the results that I want, I keep getting stuck, I'm not breaking through to that next level, then please talk to me about your leadership psychology, your strategy in business, and the structures that you're using to empower you. This is my greatest passion. It's my greatest love. I appreciate you letting me share with you what I love. I hope today's given you a bit of an insight into what it's like being coached, where you address and correct perceptions that'll empower you. They're not the truth, but they'll just empower you more. My name's Emily Diamond. Please stop by my website, emilydiamond.com.au, book in a call with me, check out my resources. I look forward to speaking with you soon.